الحمد لله وحده، والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده، وبعد. فهذا باب التوبة من كتاب رياض-الصالحين للإمام النووي رحمة الله عليه. نبدأ بشرحه متوكلين على الله تبارك وتعالى، راجين من الله العلي القدير أن يجعل من هذا الذي نسمعه دافعا لنا لأن نبادر بالتوبة ونبادر بالإنابة إلى الله تبارك وتعالى. قال الإمام النووي رحمة الله عليه: باب التوبة. قال العلماء: التوبة واجبة من كل ذنب، فإن كانت المعصية بين العبد وبين ربه لا تتعلق بحق آدمي فلها 3 شروط: أحدها أن يقلع عن المعصية، والثاني أن يندم على فعلها، والثالث أن يعزم ألا يعود إليها أبدا، فإن فقد أحد الثلاثة لم تصح التوبة. وإن كانت المعصية تتعلق بحق آدمي فشروطها 4، هذه 3: وأن يبرأ من حق صاحبها، فإن كانت مالا أو نحوه رده إليه، وإن كانت حد قذف ونحوه مكنه منه أو طلب عفوه، وإن كانت غيبة استحله منها، ويجب أن يتوب من جميع الذنوب، فإن تاب من بعضها صحت توبته عند أهل الحق من ذلك الذنب، وبقي عليه الباقي. وقد تظاهرت دلائل الكتاب والسنة وإجماع الأمة على وجوب التوبة.
The Shaykh began first by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sending his peaces and salutations upon his prophet and his messenger sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sallam. And then he said that we're going to do some reading from the chapter of At-Tawbah from the book that was authored by Al-Imam An-Nawawi, that is called Riyad-us-Saliheen, which translates into the gardens of the righteous. And the reason why he named it the gardens of the righteous is because each and every chapter that he mentions, it is as if it is a garden that the righteous people want to enter into so as to take the benefit from those gardens. So today, the garden that we're dealing with is the garden of At-Tawbah. He went on to say, before we proceed, we would like to depend on Allah, to make the tawakkul on Allah, and to ask and to hope from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us some benefit from what we're about to embark upon, and to make us of the people who hurry up to make the tawbah and who hurry up to do the righteous deeds so that they can be successful. So he went on to proceed by beginning with the statement of Al-Imam An-Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi, who said, the ulama or the scholars of Islam are of the opinion that tawbah is wajibah, that tawbah is obligatory from every single sin that the person does. And if that sin is a sin that is connected or is only concerning what is between the servant and his Lord, and it has no connection and no relation to any human being, then the conditions of that tawbah are 3. If the sin that the person has committed is between him and his Lord, and no other human being has anything to do with it, then the conditions of him making tawbah are 3. The first condition is that he should leave alone altogether that thing that he's doing. The second thing is that he should feel bad about it, he should feel sad about it. And finally, the third thing, if that sin is between him and his Lord, the third thing is that he should decide that he's not going to return back to it. If he was to do these 3 conditions concerning the sin that was between him and his Lord, then his tawbah will be accepted. He went on to say, Al-Imam An-Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi, if the sin that he fell into is connected to a human being, then it has 4 conditions. The 3 previously mentioned conditions: that he should leave it alone altogether, and that he should feel sorry about it, and that he should resolve not to return back to it. And then you add the fourth condition, and that is that he should give back to that human being the rights in which he took from him. So if he took from him, for an example, some money or something that is similar to it, some monetary gain that he received, anything like that, he should return it back to him. And if he has falsely accused that person, then he should try to request from that person to forgive him for what he's done. Or if he has made some ghiba, or he bit the back of the person, he should try to go to the person to inform him of what happened in the hopes that the person would forgive him for what he did. He said if the person was to do this and all of these conditions were to be present, then he will be forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if one of these 4 or 3 conditions are missing, then his tawbah will not be accepted and it will be incomplete.
ونقف عند هذا الكلام نشرحه ونبين أدلته. التوبة هي مرحلة أو منزلة للعبد تصاحبه في بدايته وفي نهايته، فهي لا تفارق العبد من الحياة إلى الممات. وبداية هذه التوبة ندم يورثه البعد عن الله، يورثه معصية الله، يورثه الابتعاد والوقوع في الخطيئة. فإذا شعر الإنسان بعزم وقصد على الندم فهذه بداية التوبة. ولذلك قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم الندم توبة. وهذا العزم ينتج عن إدراك أن المعاصي حجاب بين العبد وربه، وأنها تميت القلوب، كما قال ابن المبارك رأيت الذنوب تميت القلوب وخير لنفسك عسنها. فعندما يعلم العبد أن هذه الذنوب حجاب بين الله وبين العبد وهو يريد أن يفر إلى الله، فلا يجد مفر من الله إلا إليه، لأنه لا منجى من الله إلا إليه. ولذلك يهرع إلى باب التوبة والاستغفار والندم وعدم الإصرار، متضرعا إلى الله تبارك وتعالى أن يغفر له، أن يقبل رجوعه، أن يعفو عنه، أن يتقبله في عباده الصالحين.
The Sheikh went on to say, before proceeding, we want to take a few moments here now to explain what has already gone forth and to explain it according to the proofs that we have from the Qur'an and from the authentic Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, as for this tawbah is actually something that is connected to the servant, and it will never ever leave him. It will be with him from the beginning that he comes to the realization of who he is to the end of his life, and it will never leave him. And the beginning of the tawbah itself, when a person is about to make tawbah, one of the indications that he is on the right way, and one of the ways that he knows that he's about to make tawbah, is that this tawbah, what it does is it gives the servant the opportunity to realize when it's present. It gives the servant the opportunity to realize that he is doing something that is not right, because he feels that he is away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whenever the servant begins to feel this way, he has this inert desire to make tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said in the authentic hadith, he said, an-nadamu tawbah, he said to feel sorry about what you did in and of itself is tawbah. Before the person even makes tawbah, when he has this feeling of remorse that comes over him, this feeling of sorrow and nadam, tawbah. This is the reason why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said this issue. The Shaykh went on to say that when the person wants to make this tawbah, he wants to make it because he realizes that the thing that he does is not correct, the evil that he is doing is not correct, because the evil, what it does is, it causes the heart to die. It brings the death to the heart, as the famous scholar and Imam of al-Islam, Abdullah ibn Mubarak radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he said in an authentic statement that has been attributed to him, he said, "Verily I have seen with my own eyes that the sins are responsible for causing the death of the heart. So joy to the man who realizes that." The Shaykh went on to say that whenever the servant realizes that the tawbah or the sins that he does is a hijab or a covering between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he makes it his business to hurry up to begin to make tawbah. And he makes it his business to hurry up to begin to make al-istighfar, or to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. And he makes it his business to become sorry for the evil that he has done, because he doesn't want any hijab to be between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he hopes and he has the raja that Allah ta'ala will accept from him what he is putting forth, and would accept from him his tawbah, and not make him accountable and responsible for the evil that his hands have manufactured.
قول الإمام: قال العلماء التوبة واجبة من كل ذنب. هذا الحكم الشرعي للتوبة، وأنها فرض واجب على الأعيان، ويدل على ذلك أمور. أولها الأمر بها، كما في قول الله تبارك وتعالى: وتوبوا إلى الله جميعا أيها المؤمنون لعلكم تفلحون. وقول الله تبارك وتعالى: يا أيها الذين آمنوا توبوا إلى الله توبة نصوحا. الأمر الثاني أن الذنب حتم لازم لبني البشر، كما قال رسولنا صلى الله عليه وسلم: كل ابن آدم خطاء وخير الخطائين التوابون. وقال صلى الله عليه وسلم: لو لم تذنبوا وتستغفروا لذهب الله بكم، وجاء بقوم يذنبون فيستغفرون فيغفر لهم. فلما كان الذنب واقع لا محالة من الإنسان، فهذا يعني أن الإنسان يقع في التقصير والنقص والضعف، فلا بد له من أمر يجبر هذا النقص وهذا الضعف وهذا الابتعاد عن الله تبارك وتعالى، ولا يكون ذلك إلا بالتوبة. ولذلك فما لم يتم به الواجب إلا به فهو واجب، ولذلك فالتوبة واجبة على كل مسلم، على كل إنسان، لأن الذنب لا يخلو منه إنسان، فهي واجبة على الأعيان وليس على الكفاية، بل كل إنسان يطلب منه أن يتوب. ولذلك عمم الله التوبة: وتوبوا إلى الله جميعا أيها المؤمنون لعلكم تفلحون.
The Shaykh went on to say in explaining the initial and original statement of Imam al-Nawawi when he first began, when he said at-tawbah wajibatun ala kulli Muslim, that tawbah is obligatory upon every Muslim. He went on now to explain what that means, and that's what he's going to do. He said that this statement of al-Imam al-Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi is an Islamic ruling. It's a hukum shar'i. It's a legislative ruling from the religion. And it is obligatory upon every single person. It is fardu ayn, meaning every single person has to make it his business to make tawbah, and no one else can make tawbah for someone else. And the proof of this statement of Imam al-Nawawi, that the tawbah is wajibah on every single person, his personal self, his individual self, there are a number of reasons why we get this ruling. There are many proofs that will show us why it is absolutely wajib upon each and every person to make tawbah. The first reason is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in many ayats of the Qur'an, He has ordered the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and He has ordered the believers in the Qur'an to make tawbah. And whenever Allah orders something, then this is an obligation. He said, for an example, and make tawbah to Allah, all of you, all together, O you who believe, in the hopes that you will be successful. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to the people, Tubu ila Allah, make tawbah, He is ordering the people to make tawbah. In another ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O you who believe, make tawbah, and He described it as the tawbah nasuha, the real true tawbah that is pure and is not connected with anything of the dunya. And then the Shaykh went on to say, that's the first reason why we know that the tawbah is wajibah, is that Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, He ordered it to be done. He made the amr of the tawbah. The second reason why we know that tawbah is wajib is because the sins are something that the human beings are going to fall into all the time, and there's no way to escape it, and there's no way to get around it. Sins are something that are going to be done by the human beings. As the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, all of the sons of Adam sin, and the best of those who sin are the ones who make tawbah. So this hadith shows us that everyone makes sin, and he can't get away from not making it. All of the sons of Adam make sin, and the best of those who make sins are the tawwabun, those people who make tawbah. Also the Prophet ﷺ told us in another authentic hadith, if you people did not make sin, if you people did not fall into that which was wrong and you didn't make sins, verily Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have destroyed you, He would have gotten rid of you, and then He would have brought a new people. He would have created a new people who would have made sins, and then they would have asked Allah for forgiveness, and Allah would have forgiven them. So that hadith and the one that is before it shows us what? They both show us that all of the human beings are going to make sins and they can't get away from it. So this is the second point of the Shaykh. Why? Tawbah is wajibah. Because all of the people make sins, and with that being the case, there has to be something in place that would come and it would erase this evil that they're doing. Because if they're always making sin, you will find that their slate is just becoming discolored with that which is not acceptable. So when this naqs or this deficiency and this da'af or this weakness is in the human being, you find that what happens is the tawbah is the one that will come, that they need something to bring it, they need something to be present in order to get rid of that deficiency. And the Shaykh went on to say that whatever is not complete except with something else, and that other thing is also wajib. So therefore, since every single human being makes sins, they have to make tawbah, and it's wajib upon every single Muslim and every person, and it's obligatory upon the person, his individual self.
والواجب ينقسم إلى قسمين عند علماء الأصول: واجب على الفور وواجب على التراخي. فالتوبة واجب على الفور وليس واجب على التراخي، أي لا يسع العبد أن يؤخر التوبة، لأن تأخير التوبة ذنب غير ذنب، لأن الإنسان لا يدري متى يموت، وعندما لا يدري متى يموت يجب أن يفر إلى الله، ففروا إلى الله وسارعوا إلى الخيرات، إنهم كانوا يسارعون إلى الخيرات. فيجب على الإنسان أن يتوب فور وقوع الذنب مباشرة. ولذلك قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لمعاذ: وأتبع السيئة الحسنة تمحها. إذا حدثت سيئة أتبعها بحسنة. إن الحسنات يذهبن السيئات. إذن التوبة واجبة على الأعيان، واجبة على الفور.
Now the Shaykh said, in knowing that the tawbah is obligatory, or it is wajib, we need to also understand that the scholars have divided the rulings that are wajib or obligatory into two different types. There are two different types of wajib. The first type of wajib is that thing which is obligatory and it has to be done immediately. And the second type of, and you call that in Arabic, al-fawr. You have to do it immediately, al-fawr. And the second type of wajib is that thing that it is obligatory, but you have time to do it. It's compulsory upon you to do this thing, but it's at your convenience. You have time to do it. Or it's at the convenience that the legislation of al-Islam has established, and they call that at-tarahi. The Sheikh went on to say that the tawbah on the servant is of the first type, that the person has to do it immediately, and he is not afforded the luxury of sitting down and contemplating when is he going to do it. It is not befitting for the believer to waste time with making the tawbah, because no one knows when he's going to die. So with that being the case, when the person does something, he should hurry up and turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and run to Allah. And for that reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when he was in the presence of the companions, you used to see them being the people who used to race each other towards the khairat, towards those things which were the good things. And that's why we find that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in proving this point, he said to Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he said to Mu'adh, if you do an evil thing, then hurry up and follow it up with a good thing. It will erase it. If you do an evil thing, then hurry up and do a good thing. Follow it up with a good deed, and that good deed will erase it. And we have an ayat in the Qur'an in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the hasanat, or the good deeds. And Allah ta'ala told us about the hasanat, and He said, يَذْهِبْنَ السَّيِّئَاتِ, that those hasanat, or those good deeds, they destroy or they get rid of the bad deeds.
ثم قال الإمام رحمه الله: فإن كانت المعصية بين العبد وبين الله تعالى لا تتعلق بحق آدمي فلها ثلاثة شروط. ذكر الأول الإقلاع عن المعصية، ثم الندم، ثم العزم على أن لا يعود أبدا. هذه شروط ذكرها العلماء في التوبة التي تتعلق بالذنوب التي تتعلق بين العبد وربه، ولا بد أن نضيف إليها أشياء لم يذكرها الإمام النووي رحمة الله عليه. أولا، أن تكون التوبة خالصة لله، ومعلوم أن الإخلاص شرط في قبول العمل، أي عمل، ومنها التوبة. ولذلك قال الله تبارك وتعالى: وتوبوا إلى الله. قيد التوبة بأنها توبة إلى الله يبتغى بها وجه الله، وقال: وتوبوا إلى الله. ولذلك فإن التوبة إذا وقعت لغير الله، كما يحدث في بعض الطرق المتصوفة، التوبة للشيخ أو لغيره، فهذه توبة مردودة غير مقبولة. الأمر الثاني الاعتراف، فإن العبد لا يقلع عن ذنب إلا إذا اعترف بأنه ذنب. ومن هذا ينبغي أن نؤكد الاعتراف، لأنه ينفصل به المعصية عن البدعة. فالعاصي يقر بأنه أذنب ويعترف بأنه عصى. ولذلك قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لعائشة عندما رماها أهل النفاق بالإفك: يا عائشة، إن كنت ألممت بذنب فاعترفي واستغفر الله. أما المبتدع فلا يقر بذنب، لأنه لا يقر أن فعله ذنب، ومعصية، بل يعترف أنه قرب إلى الله تبارك وتعالى. ولذلك حصل الافتراق بين البدعة وبين الذنب، فالبدعة لا يتاب منها والذنب يتاب منه، لأن المبتدع لا يقر بأن هذا ذنب، بل هو يتقرب إلى الله على أساس أنه طاعة وهو في الحقيقة ذنب، بينما العاصي يقر ويعترف بأن هذا ذنب. ولذلك قال سفيان الثوري: البدعة أحب إلى إبليس من المعصية، فإن المعصية يتاب منها والبدعة لا يتاب منها. نسأل الله أن يعيذنا وإياكم من البدع.
Ameen. The Sheikh said, brothers, especially those who are writing, he said, after this, Al-Imam An-Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi said, from what we mentioned in the beginning, if the sin that the servant makes is between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it has no connection to any human being, then there are three conditions. The first condition, as has been aforementioned, is that he leaves it alone, and then he is sorry about it, and then he decides that he's not going to return to it. The Sheikh said that the scholars of Al-Islam, they have mentioned this, and they agree with this statement of Al-Imam An-Nawawi concerning the sin that is done, and it is connected between the servant and his Lord Rabbil Alameen. He said, but it is very important that we make some additions here to what Al-Imam An-Nawawi put forth that he did not mention. We have to add on to this. If the sin is between the Abd and between his Lord, we're going to add on to those three, because Al-Imam An-Nawawi didn't mention these. The first thing that we're going to add on, which is going to make it 4 now, is that tawbah that he has to make, it has to be khalisatan lillahi. It has to be sincere and totally and wholly for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has to be sincere, only for Allah. And it is well known that in order for a action to be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever action it is, and tawbah is from the a'mal, tawbah is from the action. In order for the action to be accepted, it has to, one of the conditions is that it has to have sincerity. So therefore we're going to put this here. And the proof of that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَتُوبُوا إِلَى اللَّهِ. Allah said in the Qur'an, make tawbah to who? He didn't leave it ambiguous like that for the people to make tawbah to whoever they wanted to. He said, make tawbah to Allah. So Allah ta'ala, He specified. And this specification, this signifies ikhlas. The Sheikh went on to say, so the tawbah of the person, he has to want and desire the face of Allah, or he has to want to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now if this tawbah, he said, goes and is done by the servant and is done for other than Allah, and some of you may find it strange that someone will make tawbah to other than Allah, but we have people from the deviant Sufi sects who make tawbah for the Sheikh, and they make tawbah for other than the Sheikh. And then the Shaykh, subhanAllah, he made a dua and he asked Allah to protect us all from that type of deviation. He said, if a person makes tawbah to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like to the Shaykh, then his tawbah will be rejected. And then we want to add on another thing, which will make it 5 now. The next thing that the Shaykh added on to what Imam An-Nawawi didn't mention is that there has to be some i'tiraf, or there has to be some acknowledgement from the human being. He has to acknowledge the sin that he made, and this is important. There has to be some acknowledgement, because the servant is not going to leave alone, like the first condition. He has to leave it alone. The servant is not going to leave anything alone that he's doing until he first recognizes that it is a sin. And this acknowledgement is the distinguishing factor between the evil deed or the ma'asiyah and the bid'ah. And this is important. This is muhim. This i'tiraf, or this acknowledgement, is the distinguishing factor. When it's present, it will show you the difference between the difference between the ma'asiyah, the evil, and the bid'ah. Because the person who does some evil, the asi, when he does the ma'asi, and he does something wrong, he himself will realize in the inner recesses of his own soul, he will realize that he did an evil thing. And even if he continues to do it, he knows that it's evil. And this proof can be seen and illustrated in the authentic hadith of our mother Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, in the story of the ifk, when they accused her falsely and unjustly of having extramarital affairs. They said that the Prophet ﷺ said to her, because the Prophet didn't know the unseen sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said to her, "O Aisha, if you in fact did what they are accusing you of doing, then acknowledge what you're doing and make istighfar, ask for forgiveness from Allah." So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is showing Aisha how to make the tawbah. He's not accusing her of doing it. He's saying, "Oh Aisha, if you really did this thing, then make the acknowledgement, make the i'tiraf, and then make istighfar." So the Shaykh went on to say, now you find that the one who has done a sin, he recognizes and he acknowledges the sin, and then it's up to him to make tawbah or not. Whereas the mubtadi', the one who was a deviant, the one who was a companion of the bid'ah, he does not recognize nor realize what he's doing. He does not acknowledge that his actions are sins at all. He even thinks that it is something that is getting him closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why the bid'ah, the person does not make tawbah from it ever. Whereas the other person who is doing a sin, he makes tawbah from what he is doing because he's sinning. The one who's making the bid'ah, he thinks he's doing correct, so he continues to do it. And this is why the famous Imam Sufyan al-Thawri rahmatullahi alayhi, he said that the bid'ah is more beloved to Iblis than the sin is, or the ma'asiyah. And that's because the one who makes bid'ah, he does not make any tawbah, he doesn't realize that it's wrong, whereas the one who's doing some evil, he realizes it's wrong, so he makes the tawbah from it.
ثم من الشروط التي ننبه عليها ولم يذكرها الإمام النووي أن تقع التوبة في أوانها. وقد جعل الشرع حدا لعدم قبول التوبة. الأمر الأول يتعلق بشخص الإنسان، والأمر الثاني يتعلق بهذه الدنيا. أما الأمر الأول فيقبل الله توبة العبد ما لم يغرغر وما لم تبلغ روحه الحلقوم ويكون في النزع الأخير، فعندئذ لو تاب لا يقبل الله توبته كما سيأتي في بعض الأحاديث التي في الباب. والأمر الثاني أن الله تبارك وتعالى يقبل توبة العبد ما لم تطلع الشمس من مغربها، فإذا خرجت الشمس من مغربها آمن الناس حينئذ جميعا ولا ينفعهم الإيمان، كما سيأتي أيضا في بعض الآيات والأحاديث التي في الباب. وأما ما ذكره رحمه الله مما يتعلق بحقوق العباد، فلا شك أن حقوق العباد الله تبارك وتعالى لا يغفرها إلا بإرجاعها إلى العباد. ولذلك أول ما يقضي الله تبارك وتعالى بين العباد يوم القيامة في الحقوق، وأول ما يقضي بينهم في الدماء. فينبغي على من كان ذنبه متعلق بالعباد أن يبادر إلى الاستحلال من أخيه المسلم لئلا يرجع يوم القيامة مفلسا، كما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: أتدرون من المفلس من أمتي؟ قالوا: من لا درهم له ولا متاع. قال: المفلس من أمتي من يأتي بصلاة وصيام وزكاة وحج فيأتي وقد أكل مال هذا وقذف هذا وشتم هذا وسفك دم هذا، فيأخذ هذا من حسناته وهذا من حسناته، فإن فنيت حسناته قبل أن يقضي ما عليه أخذت من سيئاتهم فطرحت عليه ثم طرح في النار.
The Sheikh went on to say, Ikhwan, the next thing that we want to add on what has already gone forth is that the tawbah has to be done at its time. At the time that the individual did the sin or he did the wrong, he should make the tawbah. Yarhamakallah. Because the religion has specified and given us a particular time where the tawbah will not be accepted. There is a time that the religion has come in and said, at this time, whoever makes tawbah is not going to be accepted. So therefore, if a person does a mistake or he makes a sin, he has to do the tawbah at that time. And this has two connections to it. There are two parts to this type of, there are two parts of this time frame in which the religion has placed in order. One of those time frames is connected to the person, his own person, his soul, his body, and the other one is connected to the dunya. The time frame, there are two connections. It's connected to his body, and the other one is connected to the dunya. What does that mean? The time frame that the religion has set where the tawbah will not be accepted by the person, that's connected to his body, for an example, is that if the person is about to die and he is in the throes of death and his soul has come up to his throat and he's gargling the gargling of the dead man, this tawbah will not be accepted at this time because the reality has come to him now. So the Prophet ﷺ told us that Allah will accept the tawbah of the servant as long as he doesn't yugharghar, which means he's about to die and he said, oh, like that. So that's the tawbah, the time frame that has been connected to his person. Another example of how the religion has given us a time frame that's connected to the dunya is that the Prophet ﷺ has informed us that if the sun rises from the west and it sets in the east, the tawbah will not be accepted. Why? Because when the sun rises from the west and it sets in the east, all of the people, without any exception, are going to believe at that time, because again, they would have witnessed the true reality. But at that time, their tawbah will have no benefit. So the Shaykh went on to say that we have to make the tawbah at the time of falling into the sin. He said, as for what Al-Imam An-Nawawi has mentioned in the fourth condition that Al-Imam An-Nawawi mentioned, which was if the sin was connected or was between the servant and another human being, that he has to give that thing back, or he has to give that human being his right. He said, no doubt, this is extremely important, that the people recognize the rights of the other servants, and that they should ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive them. Also that they should ask those people to forgive them and to give back to them what they have given or what they have taken from them unjustly. Because the very first thing that Allah ta'ala is going to reckon and He's going to look into Yawm al-Qiyamah is the rights of the people and the blood that was spilt unjustly between the people. When the people stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah ta'ala, before doing anything else with the people, He's going to give everyone their rights that they deserve. And so with that being the case, those of us who have unlawfully trampled upon the rights of people, and we made a trespass against the limits ordained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we need to give back to the people their rights, so that we will not come Yawm al-Qiyamah as the muflis. And the muflis, as the hadith said that the Shaykh mentioned, the Prophet ﷺ said, who is the muflis one from amongst you people? And the muflis is the one who is bankrupt. He said, who is the one who doesn't have any money from amongst you, who's bankrupt? The people said, O Messenger of Allah, the bankrupt person amongst us is the one who has no dirham and he doesn't have any form of money. The Prophet ﷺ said, the bankrupt person for my ummah is not that person, but the real true bankrupt person for my ummah is the one who will come Yawm al-Qiyamah and he made a lot of salah and he made a lot of siyam and he gave his zakat and he made hajj, but he devoured the money of this person and he unjustly accused that person and he slandered that person and he abused that person and he took the money of that person. So when he comes Yawm al-Qiyamah, this person would take from him, that person would take from him, that person would take from him, and that person would take from him. And then when they begin to take from him, if all of his good deeds have been given to them, at that time the tables will be turned and then their evil deeds will be thrown on that person. So he becomes Yawm al-Qiyamah and he will have nothing saved up for him.
ثم قال الإمام رحمة الله عليه ويجب أن يتوب من جميع الذنوب. وهذا تنبيه على أن الذنوب يتاب منها جميعا سواء كانت كبائر أم صغائر، لأن بعض أهل العلم قالوا يتاب من الكبائر لأن الصغائر تكفر بمجرد اجتناب الكبائر، لقول الله تبارك وتعالى وإن تجتنبوا كبائر ما تنهون عنه نكفر عنكم سيئاتكم. فقالوا إذن الصغائر تكفر باجتناب الكبائر بالصلوات بالحج بالعمرة إلى غير ذلك. والصحيح الذي عليه أهل السنة والجماعة أن التوبة واجبة من الكبائر ومن الصغائر، لأن الله تبارك وتعالى أمر بالتوبة من الصغائر كما في قوله تعالى ولا يسخر قوم من قوم عسى أن يكونوا خيرا منهم ولا نساء من نساء عسى أن يكون خيرا منهم ولا تلمزوا أنفسكم ولا تنابزوا بالألقاب بئس الاسم الفسوق بعد الإيمان ومن لم يتب. وكل ما سبق من الصغائر بإجماع أهل العلم ومن لم يتب فأولئك هم الظالمون. فتبين أن التوبة من الصغائر واجبة كالتوبة من الكبائر. وأمر آخر معقول أن الإنسان لا يستطيع أن يجزم أنه أتى بمكفرات الذنوب على الوجه الذي أراده الله تبارك وتعالى، فلا يركن إلى عمله ويغتر بأمله، فلا يقع تكفير بأعماله التي يقدمها، لأنها قد يعتريها النقص، قد يعتريها الرياء، قد يعتريها أي عارض فيحول بينها وبين القبول. ولذلك ينبغي أن يسارع إلى التوبة من جميع الذنوب كبيرها وصغيرها، والله أعلم.
Now the Shaykh said, brothers, concerning the statement of Al-Imam An-Nawawi from the beginning, when he said that it is obligatory to make tawbah from every single evil, the Shaykh went on to say that this is a proof that we have to make tawbah from the kaba'ir as well as the sagha'ir, the major sins as well as the minor sins. Why is this important? It's important because we have bona fide scholars of Al-Islam who said that the tawbah that the abd has to make should only be from the kaba'ir. He only has to make the tawbah of the major sins. And the reason that they give that is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said in the Qur'an, He said, if you people only refrain from making the major sins, if you people only stay away from the major sins, we will forgive you for your sins. If you people stay away from the major sins that you have been prohibited from, we will forgive you for your sins, and we will cause you to enter into an honorable entering. So this ayat that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, if you stay away from the major sins, it didn't specify the minor sins, it only mentioned the major sins. So based upon it, the scholars said, some of them, that the person should stay away from the major sins. He should make the tawbah of the major sins, and when he makes the minor sins, it's going to an expiation when he makes salah and when he makes zakat and when he does these other things. It will knock that away. So now the Sheikh went on to say that, but this is not the case. We should stay away from the major and the minor sins, and if we find ourselves falling into them and find ourselves falling prey to them, then we have to make tawbah from the major and the minor sins. We make tawbah from the major and the minor sins. He said that it's clear that you have to make major sins. It's clear. As for the minor sins, what's the proof of that? The proof of that is the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Qur'an in Surah Al-Hujurat, when He said to the people, do not let a group of people look down upon or make the sukhriya. Do not let a group of people look down upon another group of people. Do not let a certain group of men look down upon another group of men. And do not let a group of women look down and scorn upon another group of women. It may be that the former group in both cases is better than the latter group. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and do not call each other by offensive nicknames. And do not look at each other and make these faces and these gestures that are not correct, that the people don't like. The different types of gestures that the people make to each other to try to take away from the place of the person in the society. Allah Ta'ala mentioned all of that. And then He went on to say, and do not call each other offensive nicknames. For verily the sin in the sight of Allah is to call the believer by offensive nicknames. Allah said, and whoever does not make tawbah, then they are from the zalimun. So here in this ayah, Allah Ta'ala, He mentioned what? He said, do not let a group of women and a group of men look down upon the other group. And Allah Ta'ala mentioned, do not use offensive nicknames that we don't like to be called by them. If a Muslim doesn't like to be called by that name, don't use it. And Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala in this ayah, He told the people not to use the offensive nicknames, to look down upon the people. The Sheikh said that there is a consensus from amongst the scholars that all of these things that have been mentioned, they're from the sagha'ir. They're from the minor sins. But at the end of the ayah, Allah said, and whoever doesn't make tawbah, they are from the zalimun. So here this ayah is encouraging and it is ordering the people to make tawbah from the sins that they are making. Another issue, another point that would show us that you have to make tawbah from the small sins is that no one from amongst us, no human being, can have the nerve to sit there and to say that he is going to be forgiven for the sins that he has made because he has come and he has made the proper tawbah for every single action that he's done, whether it's major or minor. Because there's going to be some deficiency, whether it is because of his riyad, or whether it's because of his lack of knowledge, or whatever the case may be, there's going to be some deficiency in the way we make tawbah. So with that being the case, if a person was going to say that he has made the tawbah from the major sins, and that's enough for him, it's clear that he is a person who's going to be lost. So we all should hurry up and be in a race to make the tawbah, to get the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
الحكم الأخير ذكره الشيخ رحمة الله عليه أن التوبة عند أهل السنة تختلف عن نظرة المعتزلة وغيرهم إليها. المعتزلة قالوا إذا كان يقع في بعض المعاصي مثل الزنا والخمر والقمار يجب أن يتوب من جميع هذه الذنوب ولا يقبل الله توبته من ذنب من هذه الذنوب. أهل السنة والجماعة قالوا إذا تاب من الخمر يقبل الله توبته، إذا تاب من الربا يقبل الله توبته وإن لم يتب من الذنب الآخر. فالتوبة عند أهل السنة والجماعة تتجزأ ويقبل الله تبارك وتعالى التوبة من ذنب بعينه. وأما أهل الاعتزال وغيرهم فردوا هذه التوبة وأهل السنة قالوا إن تاب من ذنب وعاد إليه ثم تاب منه قبلت التوبة. ولكن أهل المعتزلة قالوا إذا تاب من ذنب ثم عاد إليه لا يقبل توبته مرة أخرى، وهذا من باب تضييق رحمة الله تبارك وتعالى على الناس. والصواب ما ذهب إليه أهل السنة والجماعة من إن الله تبارك وتعالى يقبل توبة العبد من ذنب بعينه، ويقبل توبته إن كررت، لما جاء في الحديث عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الله إذا شرب العبد الخمر لا يقبل الله له صلاة 40 صباحا، فإن تاب تاب الله عليه، فإن عاد لم يقبل الله صلاة له 40 صباحا، فإن عاد تاب الله عليه، فإن شربها لم يقبل الله صلاة 40 صباحا، فإن تاب الله عليه، فإن عاد لم يقبل الله صلاة 40 صباحا، وإن تاب لم يتب الله عليه، وكان حقا على الله أن يسقيه من ردغة الخبال وهي عصارة أهل النار. ففي هذا الحديث كرر الذنب وكررت التوبة، لكن في المرة الأخيرة لم تقبل التوبة لوقوع الإصرار من العبد على هذا الذنب. ومعلوم أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال مدمن الخمر كعابد وثن، أي أنه إذا مات مستحلا لشربها مات مدمنا عليها، فهو عياذا بالله من أهل النار. نسأل الله تبارك وتعالى العفو والعافية.
The last thing concerning the statement of Al-Imam An-Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi is that Al-Imam An-Nawawi went on in the book to mention some differences between the Aqidah or the I'tiqad, the ideology of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and between some of the deviant sects like the Mu'tazila. He said that there is a difference in the way that they look at the issue of at-tawbah in different aspects. There are different issues and different aspects, that there are differences of opinions in those issues and those aspects as it relates to the topic of at-tawbah. For an example, the Mu'tazila, they believe that if a servant, if the abd was to drink intoxicants and he was to gamble and he was to do some other sin, they said that in order for his tawbah to be accepted, he has to make tawbah from all of those things. If he did those things at the same time, he consumed khamr and he gambled at the same time and he did other things that were haram at the same time, he can't make the tawbah from one of them and that be accepted. He has to make tawbah from all of them in order for his actions to be forgiven. Whereas Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they are of the opinion that if a person consumed the khamr and he gambled and he devoured riba, for an example, and he chose to make the tawbah from the consumption of the intoxicant, or he chose to make the tawbah from taking and devouring riba, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept that aspect of his tawbah without accepting the other aspects, because he didn't make tawbah yet. So if he did make tawbah for a specific aspect of his actions, then it is the belief of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, based upon the proof, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could accept his tawbah. So those people who are saying that the person who does a sin, yarhamakallah, the person who does a sin and then he goes back, and they also, another point of difference between the two groups, between the Mu'tazila and the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we just mentioned the first point, that they say you have to make tawbah for everything in order for one thing to be accepted. Ahl Sunnah say no, you can make tawbah from something specifically. And that doesn't mean that you're being encouraged only to make tawbah from one thing. Now we're coming to a second point. And the second point that the Shaykh mentioned, a point of difference between the Mu'tazila and the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, is that the Mu'tazila are of the opinion, if a person made a sin and then he returned back to that sin, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he made a sin and then he made tawbah and then he returned back to that sin, they believe that Allah ta'ala will not accept the tawbah. And the Shaykh said that this is clearly a restriction that Allah Ta'ala has not given any authority for, and it is constricting the rahmah or the mercy that is of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's endless and it's bounty. He went on to say that as for Ahl Sunnah, they don't believe that. They believe that if the person makes tawbah, he makes a sin and he makes tawbah, then he turns back to that tawbah, he turns back to that sin, that he can make tawbah again. The person can sin, make tawbah from the sin, and then go back to that sin and make it again, and then make tawbah from that sin. And the proof of that is the authentic hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, if the servant of Allah was to consume some khamr, if someone was to drink some intoxicant, Allah would not accept his salat for 40 days. If he makes tawbah, Allah will make tawbah, Allah will forgive him. And then if he goes back to drinking, Allah will not forgive his salat for 40 days. And then if he makes tawbah, Allah will forgive him. And then if he goes back to drinking, Allah will not accept his salat for 40 days. And then if he makes tawbah, Allah will forgive him. And then the 5th time, if the man goes back to drinking again, Allah will not forgive him for his sins. So here again, this hadith is one of the hadith that Ahl Sunnah use to show that a man can make a sin, make tawbah, go back to it, and he can make the tawbah again. Again, the Prophet ﷺ said, if the abd consumes some alcohol, Allah will not accept his salat for 40 days. If he makes tawbah, Allah will forgive him. If he goes back to it, Allah will not forgive him for 40 days, will not accept his salat for 40 days. If he makes tawbah, Allah will forgive him. If he goes back to drinking it, Allah will not accept his salat for 40 days. And if he makes tawbah, Allah will make tawbah upon him, will forgive him. If he goes back to drinking the khamr the 4th time, the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah Ta'ala will not forgive him. So we see here, and then the Prophet said at the end of the hadith, and verily it is Allah's right over that person that he causes him to drink from the fire of the nar, of the hellfire. So now the Shaykh went on to say, we need to explain this hadith so the people won't think that Allah Ta'ala will not forgive him for what he did. The reason why this hadith is saying that is that the Prophet ﷺ said in another hadith, and it explains this one, why Allah won't forgive him after 4 times. And that is that the Prophet ﷺ said that the one who was mudmin on the khamr, the one who was an alcoholic, he is addicted to intoxicants. He's mudmin, he's addicted. The Prophet ﷺ said, the one who is an alcoholic, the one who is addicted to intoxicants, he is like the one who worships the watan, or the one who worships idols. So idol worshippers will not go into paradise. It's as if this person is saying that drinking intoxicants is halal. So he becomes like the idols, who are things that are worshipped other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
ثم قال الإمام النووي رحمة الله عليه قال الله تعالى وتوبوا إلى الله جميعا أيها المؤمنون لعلكم تفلحون. هذه الآية 31 من سورة النور يأمر الله تبارك وتعالى جميع المؤمنين بالتوبة، وهذا يدل كما ذكرنا سابقا أن التوبة واجبة على الأعيان، فمن استجاب وتاب فقد تأكد نجاحه وتحقق فلاحه. فإن كلمة لعل في كتاب الله تأتي للتحقيق ولا تأتي للترجي، تأتي للتحقيق، فعلق الله تبارك وتعالى فلاح العبد ونجاحه وفوزه بالتوبة التي يتوبها، وهذا يدل على استحبابها بل على وجوبها، فليسارع كل منا إلى ذلك.
He said that now Al-Imam al-Nawawi in the beginning he said, and you all can go back to this Riyad-us-Saliheen because it's translated. He said that Al-Imam al-Nawawi said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and make tawbah to Allah all together, O you who believe, in the hope, or la'alla, in the hope that you people have success. This ayat, and Imam al-Nawawi said, is ayat number 31 from Surah An-Nur. Ayat number 31 from Surah An-Nur. And as it has already been mentioned, Al-Imam al-Nawawi, rahmatullahi alayhi, the Shaykh was reading from the book, he is ordering all of the nas, all of the people to make tawbah. And min istajaba, whoever hears this beckoning and this call, and he goes and he makes the tawbah, he would definitely get the tahqiq of this success. He would get the success. And Imam al-Nawawi here went on to explain something in the Arabic language as it relates to this ayat, and that is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ, in the hopes that you people will get the success. He said that in Arabic language, this word la'alla, it can mean here, it means tahqiq, that is definitely going to happen. Because it can mean two things. Sometimes la'alla can mean that something is definitely going to happen, and sometimes it can mean in the hopes. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't happen. But and Imam al-Nawawi was saying here that the meaning of la'allakum here is that if you made this tawbah, for sure, you're going to be successful. So the Shaykh went on to say that this statement of Imam al-Nawawi's was extremely important to show the people that in making tawbah you're going to be successful. With that being the case, we need to make it our business to make this tawbah as quickly and as Islamically as possible.
وقال تعالى وأن استغفروا ربكم ثم توبوا إليه. هذه الآية أيضا فيها حض على الاستغفار وأمر بالتوبة، والاستغفار يكون من الذنوب السالفة السابقة. وقد سئل شيخ الإسلام رحمة الله عليه أيهما أولى، الاستغفار أم التوبة؟ فقال رحمة الله عليه إن كان الثوب متسخا فهو بحاجة إلى غسل قبل أن يطيب، وإن كان نظيفا فهو بحاجة إلى تطييب. يعني بذلك شيخ الإسلام رحمة الله عليه إذا كان العبد غارقا في المعاصي فقبل الاستغفار يتوب حتى يرجع إلى الله تبارك وتعالى ثم يستغفر. فالاستغفار والتوبة مطلوبان من العبد أن يستغفر الله وأن يتوب إليه.
The Shaykh went on to say, Ikhwan, that another ayah in the Qur'an is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to the people, and pay attention to this, He said to make istighfar from your Lord, and after that make tawbah to Allah. Allah said in the one ayah, make istighfar, you people, to your Lord, and then after making istighfar, make tawbah. He said this ayah shows us that it is encouraging us and ordering us to make the istighfar first. And the istighfar, what is it? It is seeking the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as it is connected to the sins that you've done in the past. The sins that are still there that were done in the past. You make istighfar for those things. So the Shaykh of Islam, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi alayhi, he was approached by a man and he was asked, which one is better? Which one should we do first? Which one has more rights over us? That we make istighfar or that we make tawbah? So the Shaykh said, rahimahullah ta'ala, if a man had a thobe and his thobe was dirty, the thobe would need to be cleaned before you can put the oil on it or the perfume on it. And if the thobe was clean, the thobe would still be in need of what? Some perfume to enhance its beauty. He said that the meaning of this statement of Shaykh al-Islam is that if a person is ghariqan, or a person is drowning in sins that he's done, then he has to make the tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas if a person has some things that have been done in the past already, then he still needs to realize that he has to make it his business to go ahead and to try to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy upon him and to forgive him for his sin.
ومن الأحاديث التي في هذا الباب وهي كثيرة ولكن لا نستطيع أن نقف عليها، لكن اخترت بعض الأحاديث إن شاء الله حتى تفي بالغرض إن شاء الله. وعن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال: سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول: والله إني لأستغفر الله وأتوب إليه في اليوم أكثر من 70 مرة. الحديث أخرجه البخاري. أستغفر الله أي أطلب المغفرة، وهي الصفح عن الذنب وتبديله. وتكفير الذنوب يقع على نوعين: النوع الأول محو الذنب، والنوع الثاني التبديل. أما النوع الثاني المحو فهو أن يزيل الله المعصية ويمحوها، لقول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: وأتبع السيئة الحسنة تمحها. وأما التبديل فهو الله أن يبدل الله السيئة حسنة، كما قال الله تبارك وتعالى: فأولئك يبدل الله سيئاتهم حسنات وكان الله غفورا رحيما. المقام الأول علماء هو مقام العفو، والله تبارك وتعالى عفو يحب العفو. والمقام الثاني عند العلماء هو المغفرة، والله غفور رحيم. وقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم أتوب إليه أي أعزم على التوبة، أعزم على التوبة. نعم تفضل.
The Sheikh said now we're going to just read a few hadith and then we're going to be finished here. And he said in actuality there are too many hadith that we can read, but we're only going to read a few that are going to serve our purpose here today. And the first hadith that we want to mention, he said, is the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, in which he said that I heard the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sallam say, verily I make istighfar and I make tawbah to my Lord at least 70 times every day. Verily I make istighfar and I make tawbah to my Lord at least 70 times a day. And this hadith has been collected by Al-Imam al-Bukhari rahmatullahi alayhi. The Shaykh said the meaning of istighfar is that the person makes the talab of the maghfirah, that the person asks and he suggests and requests from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive him. And he said that this istighfar is of two types. When a person does a sin, the sin is before him, and there are two things that can be done in terms of how his sins can be dealt with. The first way is that Allah Ta'ala wipes the sin away. He does a sin and Allah wipes the sin away. How is that done? How is the proof? What is the proof of that? That the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said to Mu'adh bin Jabal radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, when you do a crime, when you do a sin, follow it up immediately with a good deed, and Allah will wipe it away. That good deed will wipe the evil away. The second thing that is done with the crime or with the sin is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can make the tabdeel. In one instance it's wiped away. In the second instance, that sin can be changed from a bad deed into a good deed that remains. And the proof of that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke about the righteous, and He said, فَأُولَئِكَ, and those people are the ones who we change sayyi'atihim, their bad deeds, and we make them what? Hasanat, we make them good deeds. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَكَانَ اللَّهُ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا, and Allah is Ghafoor, and Allah is Rahim. Allah is all merciful, Allah is all forgiving. So the highest level that we're looking for is the afu, that Allah Ta'ala forgives us totally and He overlooks what we're doing. and then look for the maghfirah, that Allah Ta'ala forgives us for the evil that we put forth.
معنى الحديث أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يتوب ويستغفر الله تبارك وتعالى 70 مرة، وفي رواية أكثر من 70 مرة كما سيأتي. بعض الناس قال كيف يستغفر الرسول، كيف يتوب الرسول وهو معصوم؟ ولا إشكال في ذلك، لأن التوبة من سنن المرسلين، كما تاب آدم عليه السلام فتلقى آدم من ربه كلمات فتاب عليه إنه هو التواب الرحيم. وإبراهيم تاب إلى الله ربنا واجعلنا مسلمين لك ومن ذريتنا أمة مسلمة لك وأرنا مناسكنا وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. وموسى عليه السلام تاب، فلما أفاق قال سبحانك تبت إليك وأنا أول المؤمنين، ولذلك لن يتخلف عن موكب المرسلين محمد خاتمهم صلى الله عليه وسلم، أفلا يكون عبدا شكورا صلى الله عليه وسلم. ثم أن التوبة من النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم تقع تعليما للأمة، تعليما للناس، كما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في الحديث الثاني، الحديث الأغر المزني: يا أيها الناس توبوا إلى الله واستغفروه فإني أتوب في اليوم 100 مرة. تفضل أبو سلام.
The Sheikh went on to say, now I want to explain to you, brothers, so that we don't have any misunderstanding. What does it mean, the hadith, when the Prophet ﷺ said, verily I make tawbah to Allah 70 times a day? What does it mean? Because we need to understand that 70 times a day is mentioned in this hadith, but in other riwayat, there's more times than mentioned. He mentioned more than 70 times in other hadith. So the person may say, how is it that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has to make istighfar? How is it that the Rasul alayhi sallam, being that he's a messenger of Allah and he's a prophet, how is it that he has to make istighfar? The Shaykh said that there's no ishkal, there's no problem with this, there's nothing wrong, this is the easy issue to understand. The explanation of this is, number one, that tawbah, making tawbah and istighfar, is from the sunnah of all the prophets and all the messengers. It is from the sunnah of the mursaleen. Do you not see that Adam, Allah tabarak wa ta'ala said, فَتَلَقَّى آدَمُ مِنْ رَبِّهِ كَلِمَاتٍ. Adam accepted some words from his Lord, and then he made tawbah and Allah accepted it from him. Allah gave Adam some words to say about making tawbah, and Adam and his wife Eve, they said those words, and Allah forgave them for what they did. So this is showing this from the sunnah of the righteous, the sunnah of the messengers who have been sent, that Allah gave Adam these words and Allah Ta'ala accepted it, and Allah went on to say, Innahu huwa tawwabur rahim. Verily Allah is tawwab, He is always forgiving the one who makes tawbah, and He is rahim. Also we find Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam in the Qur'an making the dua, when he asked Allah and he said, oh my Lord, make me and my son Ismail, make us two Muslims to you, submitting to you, and make our progeny, our children also submissive and Muslim. This is in Surah Al-Baqarah, both of these ayahs. Oh my Lord, make me and my son submissive to you, Muslim, and make our generation, our children, our offspring also Muslims to you, and show us our manasik, show us the things we're supposed to be doing in Hajj and things like this. Show us our manasik, and make tawbah and forgive us, for verily you are all forgiving, all merciful. So here we have Ibrahim. And then the Shaykh said that Musa alayhi salatu wassalam, when he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow him to see Allah in this life, Allah ta'ala told him to look at the mountain, and then Musa went out and he lost consciousness, and then when he came through he said, glory unto you my Lord, Glory unto you, my Lord, and I make tawbah to you for what I requested. I make tawbah to you. And verily I am the first of those who are Muslim. So this is showing us what? That it shouldn't be a problem to understand that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made istighfar, or the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made a tawbah, because this is the sunnah of the mursaleen. And then the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said when our mother saw him praying and his feet were swelling and they were bleeding, she said, why are you so difficult on yourself? He said to her, should I not be what? An abdin shukura. Should I not be a slave who was thankful? So this is why he made the tawbah, and this is why he made the istighfar. The second reason, ikhwan, why we have the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam making istighfar. That was the first reason, right? We gave you the sunnah of the mursaleen. The second reason for the people who are writing, and for you other brothers, is that he is teaching the people. Salim al-nas. And the proof of that is the hadith of Aghar al-Muzani, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. This companion said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to the people. Now pay attention here. He said, "O you people, make tawbah to Allah and ask Allah for the istighfar, for verily I make tawbah 100 times a day." So when he encouraged the people to make tawbah and to make istighfar, he is saying to those people, I'm ordering you to do this. Now look at me. I'm ordering you. Why? Because I make tawbah 100 times a day. So he did it for the ta'lim al-nas, for the teaching of the people.
اخترنا أول حديث في الباب ونختار آخر حديث في الباب، وهو حديث أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: يضحك الله سبحانه وتعالى إلى رجلين يقتل أحدهما الآخر يدخلان الجنة، يقاتل هذا في سبيل الله فيقتل، ثم يتوب الله على القاتل فيسلم فيستشهد. متفق عليه، أي أخرجه الإمام البخاري والإمام مسلم.
The Sheikh said, we're going to finish here now. We chose to read the first hadith of the chapter of At-Tawbah. Now we're completed by reading the last hadith of the chapter of Tawbah, the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. He said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala laughs, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yadhak, that Allah he laughs. Allah laughs at two men. One of them is fighting in the cause of Allah fi sabilillah, and he is slaughtered and he is killed. And then the other man makes tawbah and he comes into the religion, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives him, and he also is killed in the cause of Allah, and he goes to Jannah. Allah laughs at those two men who make this tawbah. The first one, the one who killed him and then he came into Islam. He made tawbah and he came into Islam. He said that this hadith has been collected by al-Bukhari and Muslim rahimahullah ta'ala.
أفاد هذا الحديث إثبات صفة الضحك لله تبارك وتعالى، وهو من صفات الأفعال التي تقوم بالله تبارك وتعالى، وهذه الصفة من الصفات التي انفردت السنة بإثباتها. ومعلوم أن حكم الكتاب كحكم السنة، وحكم السنة كحكم الكتاب، فأي صفة وردت في كتاب الله وفي سنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم نثبتها، فنثبت لله الضحك، لكن ليس كضحك الآدميين، ليس كضحك الخلق، لأن ذات الله تختلف عن ذوات المخلوقين، فصفاته تختلف عن صفات المخلوقين، فضحكه يختلف عن ضحك المخلوقين. ولا نؤول هذه الصفة كما فعل المعتزلة والمعطلة وغيرهم، إذ أولوا هذه الصفة فقالوا أن الضحك يعتري البشر عند الفرح والطرب وغيرهم، وهو غير جائز على الله، ونسوا أن هذا الذي علموه هو ضحك البشر، ولكنهم يجهلون كيفية ضحك الله تبارك وتعالى، لأنهم يجهلون ذات الله تبارك وتعالى. ولذلك قالوا هي مجاز عن الرضا، وهذا تأويل خاطئ، بل أن الله تبارك وتعالى نثبت له الضحك كما يليق بجلاله وكما أخبرنا به رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. وهذا يدل على أن الله تبارك وتعالى يفرح بتوبة العبد، كما جاء في بعض الأحاديث: الله أفرح بتوبة أحدكم من إنسان وضع متاعه على راحلة ثم نام، ثم انطلقت هذه الراحلة، ثم قام فاستيأس فنام، ثم قام وجد راحلته على رأسه فقال من شدة الفرح: اللهم أنت عبدي وأنا ربك. أخطأ من شدة الفرح. الله يفرح للعبد إذا تاب وأناب ورجع، والله خلقنا يا إخواني ليغفر لنا ليتوب علينا. وفي هذا الحديث دلالة على أن الاستشهاد في سبيل الله من موجبات الجنة، ولذلك ختم الإمام النووي رحمة الله هذا الحديث بهذا الباب. لماذا؟ لكي يقول لنا: لا تيأسوا من رحمة الله. فهذا الإنسان قتل مسلما ثم من الله عليه بالتوبة فآمن وأسلم، ثم قاتل في سبيل الله، ثم قتل، ثم استشهد، ودخل القاتل والمقتول الجنة. وهذا يدل عليه قول الله تبارك وتعالى: قل يا عبادي الذين أسرفوا على أنفسهم لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله إن الله يغفر الذنوب جميعا. وهذه أرجى آية في كتاب الله. نسأل الله تبارك وتعالى أن يجعلنا من المفلحين، من التائبين، من الذين يسارعون إلى الرجوع إلى الله تبارك وتعالى. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Now, Ikhwan, the Sheikh, after reading the last hadith of this chapter, and we're finished with this chapter, he said, from what we benefit in this last hadith that was mentioned, the hadith of Allah laughing at the two men, he said what we benefit is that it establishes for us the characteristic of ad-dahak, that Allah laughs. Our Lord Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one who laughs. And this laughing is a characteristic that is connected to his af'al, or his action. And this action, ad-dahak, this characteristic, is a characteristic that only the Sunnah mentions. But whether it's the Sunnah or the Qur'an establishing something about Allah or Islam, we accept it and we don't reject it, and we don't make any distinction or any differences between the two. So we need to understand that Allah laughs in a way that is befitting His Majesty. And we can't be like the people who are the ones who make the ta'weel. They give false meanings and interpretations to these types of issues here. Like the Mu'tazila and like the Mu'attila, who say that this laughing is not befitting to be an attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it's from the attributes that are connected and that are peculiar only to the human beings, to the bashar. So therefore we have to reject this hadith even if it is in Bukhari and Muslim. So the Shaykh went on to say that they did not understand, and they do not understand, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's laughing is not like their laughing, nor is it like the laughing of any other creation. It is not like the laughing of the human beings. So they are ignorant of Allah's essence, who Allah is, the Dhatullah. They are ignorant of it, like everyone else is. We don't know the reality, who Allah, how Allah is. So therefore, since we're ignorant of that, we're also ignorant of this aspect of His laughing. But suffice it to say that Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala laughs in a way that is befitting His Majesty and His might and His power. And we cannot be oppressive and go overboard like these people who say, what? They say that the laughing here is majaz, that is allegorical, that it doesn't really mean what it's saying. It doesn't really mean that he laughs, but it has another implication, another meaning. They say the meaning of it, if Allah said, or the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that Allah laughs, the meaning of it is that Allah is pleased. Allah accepts that thing. That's the meaning of it. And the Shaykh said, no. We believe that Allah laughs because that's what the hadith says, Hamakallah. And that's what we understand from the language. And to say that Allah is pleased, this is a ta'wil that is khafi, that is wrong, very wrong. So we also understand from this hadith, ikhwan, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's laughing. Why? Because the murderer, he made tawbah. So we understand from this hadith that Allah becomes happy. And he has the farah whenever his servant makes tawbah. So if we want to please Allah, if we want to get close to Allah, then we can please Allah. We can make Allah pleased by making tawbah. And he does become pleased when his servant makes tawbah, as the other authentic hadith said, verily Allah is more happy when one of you people makes tawbah. He is more happy when one of you people makes tawbah. He's more happy than the man who goes out into the desert and he loses his riding beast, and on the riding beast is his food and his provisions and all that he possesses. So he loses the riding beast, and when he gives up all hope, he goes under the tree to go to sleep and to lay down in the shade to finally die. He wakes up to find the riding beast over his head, and from being so happy he says, "Oh Allah, you are my slave and I am your Lord." So that hadith shows us what? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is happy, and he becomes happy when one of us makes tawbah. He even becomes more happy than this man right here, if you can only imagine that. And Allah has created us in order to make these sins and to make the tawbah from those sins, as it has been mentioned in the other hadith. If you people did not sin, Allah would take you away, and he would bring another people who would sin, and then they would ask Allah to forgive them, and he will forgive them, and they will enter into paradise. Finally, what we understand from this hadith, ikhwan, is that this hadith is a proof that the person who makes the istishhad, or the person who gets the shahada fi sabilillah, the person who is killed in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this istishhad or the shahada is from the mujib or the mujibat of the Jannah. If you get killed in the cause of Allah, this is one of the reasons why you would deserve going into the paradise. And for that reason, look at the fiqh and the understanding of Imam al-Nawawi. And we told you brothers before that whenever those ulama used to write their books, we can understand the fiqh. The Shaykh said, now look at the understanding of Imam al-Nawawi. Why did Imam al-Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi bring this as the last hadith? He brought this as the last hadith in the chapter of Tawbah to show us what? To show us that you should not give up from the mercy or hoping for the mercy of Allah. You should not ever give up hope that you're not going to be forgiven, irregardless of what you do. Because here we have a man who killed a believer who was fighting in order to raise Allah's religion and in order to protect the religion of Allah in the earth. And this man was in opposition to him, and he was his adversary, and he killed him. And then when this man, Allah wanted him to have tawbah, he wrote in his heart tawbah, he made tawbah, he came into Islam, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgave him. So it shows us what? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive you, so you shouldn't give up hope. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Qur'an, and do not give up hope of the mercy of Allah, and no one gives up hope of Allah's mercy except the people who are oppressive to themselves. So with that being the case, ikhwan, we need to make tawbah. And this ayat that was just mentioned, do not give up hope of getting the mercy of Allah. This ayat, the Shaykh said, is the arja ayat of the Qur'an. It is the ayat that has the most hope. It is the one ayat whose message, the primary message of this ayat is, there's not another ayat that is in competition with this ayah in terms of encouraging the people to have hope and not to give up hope.
To Jazakumullah khairan to Sheikh Salim and Abu Usama for translating. Inshallah we'll have questions for 15 minutes and then we'll break until after Asr, and we will resume again after Asr for Adab al-Safar, inshallah ta'ala.